I just wanted to say something. God didn't mean for this world not to be perfect. He created a perfect world. And He wanted our relationships to be perfect. And He wanted our lives to be perfect. And He did not want us to be sick and experience death and suffering. But because of sin, we do have death and suffering in this world. And we do have hardships and hard things to have to deal with. So the world is broken now. And we, even in the brokenness, can feel God's love. He still loves us so much. And desires that we have a restored relationship with Him. So He sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to die for all of us and to die for each of us so that we can be restored and live in such a way now that we can be His hands and feet to those who are suffering in this world. As we share this song with you, I just remind myself and remind us that worshiping He who is worthy prepares us to comfort those in our midst who are suffering. Do you feel the world is broken?
We do.
And do you feel the shadows deepen?
We do.
But do you know that all the dark won't stop the light from getting through?
We do.
And do you wish that you could see it all made new?
We do.
Is all creation groaning?
It is.
But is a new creation coming?
It is.
And is the glory of the Lord to be the light within our midst?
It is.
Is it good that we remind ourselves of this?
It is.
Is anyone worthy?
Is anyone whole?
Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave. He is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. Is He worthy?
Is He worthy?
Of all blessing and honor and glory? Is He worthy of this? He is. Does the Father truly love us?
He
does.
Does the Spirit move among us?
He does. And does Jesus, our Messiah, hold forever those He loves? He does. Does our God God intend to dwell again with us? He does. Is anyone worthy?
Is anyone whole?
Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave. He is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. From every people and tribe, every nation and tongue, He has made us a kingdom and priests to God, to reign with the Son. Is He worthy?
Is He worthy?
Of all blessing and honor and glory? Is He worthy?
Is He worthy?
Is He worthy of them? He is. Is He worthy?
Is He worthy?
He is. He is. He is. He is.
Yes. Thank you, Jesus.
Man. Well, we have 3 baptismal certificates to give out this morning. Gave out one last Sunday. We had a couple guys that were sick and one working. And when I call your name, if you come and get your certificate. Mr. Larry C. Sides. Also, I'd like you guys to come stand at the door. We'd like to give you the right hand of Christian fellowship after the service. Welcome into full membership in the church. Yes. And Brandon L. Carter. Ah.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Brandon. And Mr. John D. Campbell. Wonderful. There you go.
Thank you.
And Mr. whoever's next. Or Mrs. Or Miss. Let's open our Bibles to the 2nd chapter of Mark this morning. We'll begin reading down at verse 14. The crux of the message comes from further on down. Central idea has to do with verses 21 and 22. They are 2 parallel illustrations of one verse apiece. Jesus has been preaching by the seaside and is now going back into Capernaum. And as he passed by, verse 14, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the receipt of custom, or at his booth, where he collected taxes, and said unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. And it came to pass that as Jesus sat at meat in his house, and it's unclear whether this was Levi's house or at the house of Simon where they've headquartered before. It's unimportant, really. As he sat at meat in the house, many tax collectors and sinners sat also together with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many And they followed him. And when the scribes and Pharisees, and some texts read the scribes of the Pharisees, saw him eating with publicans or tax collectors and sinners, they said unto his disciples, How is it that he eateth and drinketh with tax collectors and sinners? When Jesus heard it, he saith unto them, They that are whole have no need of the physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners unto repentance. And the disciples of John and of the Pharisees used to fast. In fact, they did it every Tuesday and Thursday, by the way. And they come and say unto him, Why do the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, but thy disciples fast not? And Jesus said unto them, Can the children of the bride chamber fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot or do not fast. But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them. That's the first allusion to the cross. And then shall they fast in those days. Here's the point of all of this. No man seweth a piece of new cloth on an old garment. Else the new piece that filled it up taketh away from the old, and the rent is made worse. And no man putteth new wine into old wineskins. Else the new wine doth burst the wineskins, and the wine is spilled, and the wineskins will be marred or ruined. But new wine must be put into new wineskins. It came to pass that he went through the cornfields on the Sabbath, and his disciples began as they went to pluck the ears of corn. And the Pharisees said unto him, Behold, why do they on the Sabbath day that which is not lawful? And he said unto them, Have you never read what David did, 1 Samuel 21, when he had need and was a-hungered? He and they that were with him, how he went into the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and did eat the showbread, holy bread, which is not lawful to eat but for the priests. Gave also to them which were with him. And he said unto them, The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. Earlier, that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. He's not only has authority to forgive sins, he has authority over the Sabbath, over everything worship. Religion starts on earth. Christianity starts in heaven. Religion is about rules. Christianity is about a relationship. Religion is man's attempt to reach God. Christianity is God's attempt to reach man. Jesus did not come to start a religion. Too many people are going to hell by way of religion already. Religion is one of Satan's favorite tools to get people funneled through the wide gate. Wide is the way that leads to destruction. And one of the main corridors for that is religion. Probably more than any other single thing that Jesus did that offended the religious people of his day was that he did not fit into their rules. Getting complaints from the Pharisees. By the way, Pharisees are not all dead today, folks. Legalism and ritualism die very hard. Jesus getting complaints. He's called 4 disciples already that weren't probably the ideal for the Pharisees of that day. He's called 4 fishermen back in chapter 1 to follow him. Simon and Andrew and James and John, and they were fishermen. That was bad enough. They were common guys, hadn't been to the rabbinical schools. We also know from what we just read that they were not in the habit of being sticklers about keeping every little ritual law. Pass through the field and it's the Sabbath, and they grab them a snack as they go through. And the Pharisees, oh, that's working. Another time they haven't washed their hands the proper way. Oh, unclean. Didn't keep the rules. Simon and Andrew, James and John, fishermen, that was bad enough. But now Jesus passes through town, and there's a guy sitting in the open air market, if you can picture such a place. Have you ever been to a third world country or to a place where they have open air markets? Here is Levi. By the way, Matthew calls him Matthew, and I guess Matthew knew his own name. Probably had more than one name. It's interesting to study. Levi, the son of Alphaeus, we're told. And then when Matthew tells the story, it's Matthew in the story. And in the list of the apostles, you have Matthew listed and James, the son of Alphaeus. Just quite interesting. Again, in that day and time, people had more than one name. We could identify him pretty safely with Matthew. Actually, if you look in the 2 references to this in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 9, verse 9, chapter 10, verse 3, he's called Matthew the tax collector. So that pretty well seals it up. And then he tells the same story and has Matthew's name in it. So that makes it pretty clear. But here's a guy collecting taxes, and the Jewish people, and in particular the Pharisees and religious folks, did not like tax collectors. Partly the tax collectors worked for the Romans, actually indirectly for the Romans. They worked for Herod. And Herod Antipas would collect the taxes from people and send part of it to Rome, and he kept part of it. And he had a deal with the tax collectors that whatever they could tax beyond what he required, that was their profit. And tax collectors were notoriously dishonest, notoriously rich, and they were hated by most people, partly because of the money deal, and partly because they were in cahoots indirectly with the Roman government. That's why it was such a hot question that Jesus was asked during Holy Week when the Pharisees said, should we pay taxes or not? I guarantee you there's nobody here running around shouting, doing jumping jacks on April 15th. But it is a necessary thing, is it not? If we're going to have the benefits of government and law enforcement and firemen and rescue operations and stuff like that, then it costs. The thing was, in their system, it was notoriously corrupt. And here's a man that's part of it. And Jesus goes up to him and says, come on and follow me. And here Jesus has selected somebody who has not lived up at all to any of the requirements of the Jewish law. And the Pharisees are incensed at this. And it's just through this little rest of this chapter. One thing after another. Your disciples don't fast. We fast Tuesday and Thursday. John the Baptist's disciples fast. You haven't taught your disciples to fast. Why not? And they're picking corn and shelling the grains off the cob and eating it as they're going along on the Sabbath. And they hadn't seen anything yet. Chapter 3 opens up and Jesus in the synagogue heals somebody on the Sabbath. and is angered. Don't miss that. Anger in and of itself is not necessarily a sin. Problem with anger is it's sort of like striking a match in dry tinder. If you're not careful and the wind's blowing, it'll get away from you. Jesus has not fit their mold. Their mold is a religious mold. I dare say that Jesus would not be considered a very good church member in lots of churches today because of the rules. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In the middle of all this, Jesus gives two little word pictures about what He came to do. He says, nobody sews a piece of new cloth, newly woven cloth, onto an old garment. Again, today it's a little bit different. There's something called sizing that's done with garments, into the warp and the woof of the woven fabric. Those fibers are impregnated with this stuff, and it keeps them from shrinking at least as much. Every time I put something on it, it's shrunk. Couldn't be me. Growing in the Lord. Whatever kind of spin you want to put on it. As a little boy, before I went to school, they used to bring chicken feed in bags when I was a boy. I grew up on a chicken farm. We had at that time, which was a great number of chickens for that time, which was 15,000. Of course, that was hand feeding days. I didn't get in much trouble because that's what I did when I came home from school. I fed chickens and did other things. We ate chicken. When they came to pick up the chickens, there'd be about 4 or 5 in each house that they couldn't catch or didn't catch or whatever, and we had chicken. They brought the feed in bags. And back in those days, they were cotton bags. And some of them had nice prints. I wore little shirts made out of it. My mama cut white chicken feed bags up and made bed sheets out of them. Me and my sister, as little children, slept in the same bed. We knew where the middle was because that's where the seam was. Get on your side. Give me some cover. The problem was that cloth hadn't been pre-shrunk because it was not made for making clothes out of. Mom would have to wash those back. Well, you sort of want to do that, had chicken feed in it anyway. But she'd have to wash them a few times to get the shrink down where it's supposed to be before she made clothes out of them. If you got an old garment made out of old-timey cloth that was not pre-shrunk and it's been washed 52 times and it comes a hole in the elbow and you get a piece of brand new unshrunk cloth that hadn't been treated with the sizing stuff they do now and sew it on there, it's going to be pretty good till you wash it, but when you wash it, that's going to go draw it up and it'll tear right beside of it. Jesus didn't come to apply a new patch onto an old religion. Now, the law, according to Paul, and Jesus would agree, is sacred and holy. But the law was not given as a means for us to get right with God. The law was given to show us we can't do anything to make ourselves right with God. Jesus is another little picture. You don't take new wine and put it in old wineskins. Wineskins, don't get too far on this. A wineskin was made out of the whole skin, the whole hide of a goat. And when they skint the goat, they skint it in the case method. That is, they didn't split it to where it was be flat. They left it together and just pulled from the head down. That's enough information. By doing that, you had a bag. They would tie up the leg holes. They could be lashed together and made watertight or wine tight, if you will, fairly easily. The hide was tanned. A tanner. By the way, tanners were part of the group that's called sinners here. You had a whole categories of people that were lumped in together. People that weren't of pure Jewish blood. People whose occupations rendered them ceremonially unclean. By the way, tanners were in that. And also everybody used leather. But they weren't unclean. It's just the ones made the leather. Yeah. I was in a church one time, many years ago, and there was a lady got real vocal about all them people smoking them nasty old cigarettes, and it ought to be banned, and that's all just blah, 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 and her husband raised the backer. A lot easier to deal with the speck in your eye than the log in mine. But you need a new wineskin if you're going to put new wine in it. New wine that doesn't mean that you just got that from the grocery store, and it's new to you. It means unfermented wine. When wine is fermented, in that process it releases gases, bubbles, and stuff. And you fill up a wineskin with that, it needs to be flexible and stretch and have give to it. You got an old wineskin hanging over there that was used 3 years ago, and it's been hanging there, and it's dry and it's stiff. And you pour that with new wine, as that new wine expands and those gases, with the fermenting process, it's going to crack. It's going to bust. Everything's going to leak out, and it's going to be ruined. Now, you might could take some old wine that's already been fermented and already, aged or whatever, all of that. Don't want to tell all I know. Y'all might think the wrong thing. Anyway, but there was 2 liquor stills within a mile of where I grew up when I was a boy in the 1960s. That's right. And today I could take you and show you the 55-gallon barrels that's got the pretty chop marks with the axe in them and stuff. Of course, they're laying some distance because of the dynamite. I actually had a deer stand right in the middle of a swamp where there was a clearing that when I first found that place, I didn't realize what it was till I found the barrels. And it was a pretty good place. But you put the unfermented wine, got to be in flexible, stretchable, givable container. Got to have a new container for the new wine. You got to have a new container for the new life. You can't take and try to pour Jesus into your old religion and make it work. He'll bust it all to pieces. Part of what goes on in churches causes all kind of problems. Is people going around with these old bags going around in the church. And by the way, that can be male and female. Can't hold this new life in them old bags of old dried up, dusted off religion. Jesus shot it full of holes, blew it full of holes. That's the reason the religious folk of his day don't like it. And I'll tell you something else. There's nothing meaner on this earth than a religious person that's offended. Been more wickedness done throughout human history based on religion than just about anything else. So why do the wineskins bust? Well, in this story that we read that has 3 little segments, we see some reasons why Jesus bursts the wineskins. It's interesting how the progression goes. You first have the little story in about 4 or 5 verses of Levi, or Matthew as it is, being called to be a disciple. Jesus is stretching them old dry skins that they've got right there. He called an unacceptable person to be a disciple. Then the disciples don't fast. John's disciples fast. We fast. Why do you don't teach your disciples to fast? He stretched the skins with calling Levi. He sort of cracked the skins by not emphasizing fasting and other rituals. And then, by violating their interpretation of the Sabbath, he blew them all to pieces. Blew those wineskins of their old religion all to pieces. Now remember, one of the 10 Commandments is to remember the Sabbath day. Is there lots of ways you can remember the Sabbath day? Yeah. Not all of them acceptable, you know. Like the 2 old guys that were sitting out in the fishing boat one day, and as they were close to the bank and the highway went by, and they saw this funeral procession go by, and one of the fishermen took his hat off. And as they went by, another one said, "Boy, that was nice and reverent." He said, "Yeah, we were married 40 years. Calling something to mind is not the same thing as remembered in a biblical sense. It says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And that's all the commandment says. Now, there are some other commandments given in Exodus and in Leviticus, and maybe a place or 2 in Numbers that sort of give some examples for this. But you see, the Pharisees had invented hundreds of rules about the Sabbath. They had decided how far you could walk and it wouldn't, and to keep it from being taken a trip. They had decided, that you couldn't drag a chair across the front yard. If the shade had moved and you needed to move your Adirondack, chair, you couldn't drag it. That's plowing. Lots of things. They had all kinds of rules around the rules, around the rules, around the rules. And that's the problem with rules, is they are quite prolific. Why do the wine skins burst? The wineskins of the old religion that the Pharisees had burst all to pieces for at least 5 reasons. First of all, Jesus is about love. He's not about rules. Now, I'm going to tell you something. We need to have some standards, okay? Christian people, in our Christian lives, we ought to have some standards. Churches need to have some standards. But standards and rules are different things. See, their problem with Levi being called to be a tax collector is Levi hadn't already been keeping the rules. The problem with rules is they have to be kept for you to be considered worthy of participation. What if? And again, I'm glad we're congregational in polity. If they had any rules, I wouldn't be the one making them in this church, okay? But what if I said, you can't come to worship if you don't already tithe? Everybody ought to tithe, right? But that's a standard, and it's an ideal that we're hoping that everybody will feel led to and have the desire to, and will eventually get to that point. Yeah. What if I said you couldn't come to Sunday school if you hadn't studied your Sunday school lesson? Yeah. You know, we have in the Bible, in 1 Timothy 3, a set of qualifications for the deaconship. Those are not rules. Those are ideals. Yeah. Yeah, we want our deacons. We want to help them get up there. We'd like for them, the closest people we have toward those ideals. Great. But nobody lives up to all of them. Jesus, well, he wasn't the husband of one wife. Again, I don't think that means you have to be married. But you see, nobody, we wouldn't have any if they had to meet the rules. And what happens in churches where it's all rule-based and rule-driven, you got, instead of people being invited and feeling included and feeling wanted and feeling, there's got to be some grace, hadn't there? Yeah. Yeah. I kind of like I think it was a cartoon I saw one time. And these little boys built them a clubhouse and had the club rules on there. We don't want anybody that's big. We don't want anybody that's little. We want everybody to be medium. You know. Yeah. We want to include. And certainly we want our people to grasp the concepts of stewardship, financially and otherwise. By the way, financial stewardship is just one small part of stewardship. You've been trusted with a life to live. You've been entrusted with abilities and opportunities that come. All of those things. We're accountable to God. We don't even own ourselves. Remember that guy in Luke 12? God called him a fool. This night your soul is required of thee. That man did not belong to himself. No man lives to himself or dies to himself, Paul said. Jesus was about love. Here's this guy sitting at the tax booth. Jesus accepted him just like he was. And the man quit his job. Left everything right there. I bet there was a run on that booth. Folks get their money back as soon as he got out of the scene. He left it sitting there and went and followed Jesus. Just like James and John and Simon and Andrew, they got up and left their life behind with the boats. And we know from reading carefully that it was a gradual kind of thing before they fully were gone from it. But there was a break right there. And here's a guy that has lots of friends. Guess what? You want to get new people into church? You know the best way to get new people into church? Have new people in the church. That's right. That's right. That's one of the secrets to a church growing. You got to have some new people. Because they'll know some other new people. And the folks that's been here 97 years, most people they know already here, or else they're out in the cemetery doing time. Yeah. Got to have new folks. And look at the ones the religious people want, as opposed to the ones that Jesus wants. Levi had a banquet, invited all his friends, want to come to me, to eat with Jesus. Eating and drinking in the Bible is a picture of fellowship. We go to Hardee's and go through the drive-thru, or we go in there and sit down across the table and feed our face across from somebody we ain't never met before. People of that day and time would be horrified. You only eat with somebody you want to have fellowship with. You want to have intimate conversation. You want to get to know them. They want to get to know you. You got pictures all through the Bible. Abraham with the 3 guys that came over that hot day. And 2 of them headed to Sodom, and the other one was the Lord. Had Sarah to fix dinner, right? Do a day's work fixing dinner. Kill a calf and skin it and dress it and cook it. I'll tell you what, a woman like that be good to find. Time goes when you're having fun. Fun goes when you're having time. And they had fellowship. And that's when the Lord shared His plan. Sending those guys to Sodom, and Abram, well, what if there's 50 righteous, or 40, or 45, or 30, or... I get my numbers mixed up. Math is a foreign language. Jesus is not about rules. He takes you like you are. We as believers, we as the body of Christ, we can't be about rules. We got to open up doors to let people in, let people participate, let people feel part of let people feel loved. Yeah, we want everybody to tithe. Yeah, we want everybody in Sunday school. Yeah, we want everybody to read their lesson. Yeah. But we want everybody. Wherever they're at. They got on to Jesus for getting Levi. And He said, I didn't come to call the righteous or self-righteous, but sinners to repent. Did you know that Jesus didn't invite everybody to follow Him? You can find it again and again and again in the Scripture. Probably the clearest places of Matthew 11:28. It's that familiar. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. He doesn't call the ones that are not burdened down with their sin. He doesn't call the ones that think I'm okay, you're okay. He doesn't call the ones that say, well, I've been to synagogue every time, and I tithe everything, and I do this, I do that, and all this. He didn't call them. He called the ones that are overloaded with their sins. Yeah. The fact is, if you're satisfied with your religion, then Jesus ain't for you. He's not a little bow you can tie on around the wrapper of your package. If He comes into your package the way your package is, He'll bust it all to pieces. He's about love, not rules. He's about the forgiveness of repentant folks. He's not about the congratulation of the righteous. Here are these Pharisees that they love to be congratulated on how religious they were. And they spend a lot of time congratulating each other, you know. Yes. Jesus wasn't about them. He was about forgiving repentant folks. And forgiveness is conditional on repentance. And those that don't realize and ain't willing to face the fact that they're broken ain't going to see a need to be fixed. The third reason the bottles, wineskins burst. Jesus is about joyful fellowship, not religious grief. Why don't your disciples fast? Let me ask you something. Are you excited and joyful about fasting? Don't get to eat. It's Tuesday. Don't get to eat today. It's Thursday. Don't get to eat again. I tell you what, the older you get, the harder that will be, because lots of the other little pleasures gone. I can't write with either hand, but I can eat with both of them. Don't deprive me. John the Baptist's disciples fasted. Well, what was John's message? Repent! You're in sin! Get right with God! Want to baptize you? Come on down to what? You got to live up to it. Do works suitable for repentance. It's going to be tough. And there's the Pharisees. You want to be one of us? We've got all these rules. Do rules make you happy? No. They do not produce joy unspeakable and full of glory. They're a bunch of handcuffs. Fasting is something you do when you're sad. Fasting is something you do when you got a real burden. Lord, get me through this surgery coming up. Lord, help me with this financial difficulty. When you fast, it's because there's something difficult. And I really need to get hold of God, and I'm so busy praying that I don't take time to eat or other regular day-to-day things. That's what fasting is. Jesus says, hey, we're talking about a wedding here. Now today, everybody is at the wedding. You don't ever read in the newspapers, yes, the groom, Mr. Smith, was dressed in a gray charcoal colored coat with tails, and his cummerbund was red, and he had on these gray pants, and they had the ruffle on the... No, they're talking about the bride dress, aren't they? Yeah. Today the focus on the bride. In that day and time, the focus was on the groom for several reasons. One of which was the bride, and again, ladies, sorry about this, but women didn't have the status in society that they do now. Women, many places, many times, couldn't own property. The bridegroom had paid the daddy for that bride. In our modern day wedding service, there's some remnants of that. Here I am, here's, Dave and Linda down here, and I say, who gives this woman to be married to this man? And daddy will say, we do. And what that's an allusion to is that all the financial arrangements has been made with the daddy-in-law. That's what that's from in ancient custom. And that's come down to us today, and we don't think a whole lot about that. But then the focus was on the groom. By the way, the honeymoon wasn't a trip to the Bahamas for the bride and the groom. The honeymoon was a week party at home with all the neighbors. I like our way better. And here's the bridegroom right before the wedding. I hope that one of the happiest days of your life was your wedding day. I hope it was. Mine was. Go kill a fatted calf and cook it, But when the bridegroom and all the attendants are right there and everything's ready for the wedding, that's a joyous. You don't fast there. Oh, if you're fasting at your wedding, that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign. He says later when the bridegroom is taken away. Now they don't know what he's talking about. The disciples don't know what he's talking about. Jesus alluding to he's going to be crucified and die and rise again and ascend. And in between that dying and rising again, those disciples were torn all to pieces. I guarantee you they missed some meals then. Scratching their heads and wondering what has gone on here. How does this work? And they dug out their Old Testaments and found out before Pentecost. He's about joyful fellowship like at a wedding. This is not a wake, it's a wedding. So the skins burst. Religion will not hold Jesus. Fourth reason the skins burst. Jesus is about what people need, not what people deserve. How many of us on the deserving plane to heaven? That one ain't even going to take off because there ain't nobody to fly it. Jesus came to treat us on the basis of what we need. Love treats us on the basis of what we need. I don't deserve to be up the pulpit preaching because I got a string of attendance pins you could make a bicycle chain out of. God didn't call me to preach because I deserve it. God didn't call me to preach because I'm so good. He called me to preach in spite of the fact that I ain't so good. But He put me here to do this. He's about what people need, not about what they deserve. And finally, He's about transforming you from the inside, not shining you up on the outside. All religion can do is it gives the old junk car a new paint job and it still won't run. He wants to take it all apart, put it back together with all new stuff. Better than ever. Like Naaman the Syrian when he come out of the water from dipping himself 7 times. His flesh wasn't like it was before he got leprosy. It was like the flesh of a little baby. Made him new. Tell me this. Have you had Jesus come and make you into a new set of wineskins? Have you let Him come and make you into a new person? Have you experienced a new birth? Have you been made into a new creation? Old things passed away, all things become new. Or are you trying to pour a little bit of Jesus into your leaky, dried up religious thing? And you're going to be totally ruined. You need a new wineskin. You need to be made totally new. And then Him fill you with Himself. That's what He wants. Not about rules. He's about love. He's not about calling righteous but repentant, forgiving repentance people. He's not about what you deserve. He's about what you need. And we as a congregation are going to have to become about what people need, not what they deserve. Not only for people that are out there, but we need to operate. There needs to be grace oiling the gears on everything we do. Yes, we got standards. We got standards that we're trying to move people toward. But you don't have to reach them to start. Jesus takes you where you're at. We got to take people where they're at. You're not perfect, nor am I. But Jesus can make you new. And I'm here to show you in the Bible how you can do that if you need that today as we stand and sing. Skins, that old bag, let Him make you new.
Grace greater than our sin. Hymn 329.
exceeds our sin and our guilt. Yonder on Calvary's mount outpoured, there where the blood of the Lamb was spilled. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. Dark is the stain that we cannot hide. What can avail to wash it away? Look, there is flowing a crimson tide. Whiter than snow you may be today.